The Great Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest room ever built by any species. It floated at the center of Varanthos Prime, a station world that had existed for 10,000 years. The walls curved upward like the inside of an egg, covered in silver metal that had been polished until it shone like water. Floating platforms held representatives from 300 species, arranged in rings that rose toward a ceiling lost in soft blue light dot at the very top. On 3 platforms larger than all the others, sat today the ruling triad. The HFY were the oldest. Their bodies were made of living crystal, and light moved through them in slow waves of purple and gold. They had ruled the galaxy before most species learned to use fire. Next to them floated the Morveth, beings of pure thought who kept their consciousness in shells of black metal shaped like teardrops. They had invented faster-than-light travel. And finally, there were the Sundarin, tall and thin with skin like polished wood and eyes that burned with orange flame. They controlled the tribute fleets that kept the galaxy in order, together. These 3 species had maintained peace for 10,000 years. They called it peace anyway. Other species had different words for it. Today, the chamber was full. Every platform was occupied. Every representative was watching the small group of beings who stood on the central speaking floor. Far below everyone else, the humans, there were 5 of them. They wore simple gray uniforms without decoration. Their leader was a woman with dark skin and white hair cut close to her head. Her name was Adaoro Concuil, and she had served as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 30 years. In all that time, she had never raised her voice. She had never made threats. She had simply watched and listened and remembered everything. Now she stood perfectly still while the ruling triad pronounced judgment on her entire species. "The humans have been found guilty," said the HFY speaker. Its voice rang through the chamber like a struck bell. "Guilty of spreading dangerous ideas. Guilty of teaching lesser species to question the natural order. Guilty of destabilizing the peace that has held for 10,000 years. A wave of sound moved through the chamber. Some species muttered in agreement. Others stayed silent. A few on the lower platforms shifted uncomfortably. The sentence is exile. The HFY continued. "A containment sphere will be placed around the Sol system. No ship will enter or leave. No signal will pass through. For 1,000 years, humanity will be cut off from the galaxy they have tried to poison with their ideas. 1,000 years. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Ambassador Okonkwo did not react. Her face remained calm. Her hands stayed clasped in front of her. The Morveth speaker drifted forward on its platform. Its voice came from everywhere at once, cold and without emotion. "The humans may speak before sentence is carried out. This is the law." Every eye in the chamber turned to the ambassador. What would the humans do? Would they beg? Would they threaten? Would they try to run? Adaoro Concuil looked up at the ruling triad. Then she looked around the chamber at the 300 species who had voted for her people's imprisonment. She took a slow breath. "We understand," she said. Her voice was quiet but clear. "We will remember this kindness." That was all. No anger, no fear, no promises of revenge. The Sundarin speaker leaned forward on its platform. The flames in its eyes flickered with what might have been confusion. "You accept this sentence? You do not protest. What good would protest do?" Okonkwo asked. "You have already decided. The vote is finished. The sphere generators are already in position around our sun. We felt them arrive 3 days ago." She paused. "We are not fools. We knew this was coming the moment we taught the Brellinak that they did not have to pay tribute. We knew it was coming when we helped the Assyria build ships fast enough to escape your tax collectors. We knew it was coming when species began to ask why 3 ancient civilizations should rule over 300. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded order. Others called for silence. The ruling triad watched without moving. Okonkwo waited until the noise died down. Then she continued. "You are not exiling us because we are dangerous," she said. "You are exiling us because we are inconvenient, because we remind other species that power does not have to be permanent, because we teach a simple truth that threatens everything you have built." "And what truth is that?" the HFY speaker asked. Its crystal body pulsed with angry red light. Concuil smiled. It was a small smile, tired and sad, but there was something else in it too. Something that looked almost like pity. That all beings are equal, she said. That no species has the right to rule another. That tribute is just another word for theft. And peace maintained by fear is just another word for slavery. The Sundaran speaker rose from its platform. Fire blazed in its eyes. You dare speak to us this way? We have ruled this galaxy since before your ancestors climbed down from the trees. We have maintained order while your kind was still learning to sharpen sticks. You are nothing. You are a young species from a small world at the edge of nowhere. And you think you can lecture us about equality? I think, Concuil said calmly, that you are afraid. Not of what we can do, but of what we represent. Ideas do not die in exile. They do not fade behind containment spheres. You can silence us for 1,000 years, and when we emerge, we will still believe that all beings deserve freedom. That is what frightens you, not our ships or our weapons. Our ideas. Silence fell over the chamber. No one moved. No one spoke. The Morveth speaker's voice cut through the stillness. Activate the sphere. Somewhere far away, at the edge of Earth's solar system, massive generators hummed to life. They were ancient technology, created by the ruling triad in the early days of their reign to contain rebellious species. The sphere they created was not made of matter. It was made of folded space itself, a wall that could not be crossed because the space inside it no longer connected to the space. Outside. Ambassador Concuil felt it happen. Every human in the chamber felt it. A strange pressure in their minds, like a door closing somewhere deep inside them. They were cut off. Alone, exiled. Concuil turned to her for companions. They nodded once. Then they walked toward the exit, their footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. No one stopped them. No one spoke to them. They were already ghosts, representatives of a species that would soon be forgotten. As they reached the door, the Sundaran speaker called out one last time. 1,000 years, it said. When the sphere opens, if any of you still survive, you will rejoin galactic civilization as a minor species. You will pay tribute like all the others. You will learn your place. Concuil stopped at the door. She did not turn around. Perhaps, she said. Or perhaps you will learn yours. Then she walked through the door, and it closed behind her, and humanity vanished from the galaxy. The celebration began before the humans were even off the station. The ruling triad accepted congratulations from 100 species eager to show their loyalty. The problem of humanity had been solved. The dangerous ideas would fade. In 1,000 years, no one would even remember why humans had been exiled in the first place. The Vethkai were already planning how to divide up human technology. The Morveth were calculating how much tribute the freed human client species would now owe. The Sundaran were discussing which species would be punished for having supported human ideas. Everything would return to normal. Everything would continue as it had for 10,000 years. No one noticed the small Brelanek delegate who slipped out of the chamber during the celebration. No one saw her activate a hidden transmitter. No one heard the message she sent, bouncing through a dozen relays until it reached a ship waiting at the very edge of the new containment sphere. The message was short. Just 3 words. It has begun. Inside the sphere, Earth received the message. It was the last communication they would have with the outside galaxy for a very long time. In a bunker deep beneath the mountains of what had once been called Switzerland, a group of humans gathered around a table. Military officers, scientists, engineers, political leaders. They had been planning for this moment for 20 years, ever since they first realized that the ruling triad would never allow humanity to exist as equals. A general named Marcus Chen looked at the faces around the table. Some were afraid, some were angry, some were determined. All of them were ready. The sphere is active, he said. We are alone. No one is coming to save us. No one will hear us if we call for help. We have only ourselves. He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed Earth's solar system, now surrounded by the shimmer of the containment sphere. They think they have buried us, Chen continued. They think we will sit in the dark for 1,000 years and emerge broken and obedient. He smiled. It was not a nice smile. They do not know us very well. He pressed another button. The hologram changed. Now it showed the sphere itself, and the energy patterns that held it together. They have given us the most advanced piece of technology in the galaxy, Chen said. They have wrapped it around us and told us to study it for 1,000 years. They have locked us in a room with the keys to every door they ever built. He looked around the table. I suggest we start learning. The lights in the bunker flickered. Deep beneath the Earth, machines began to hum. Across the solar system, 200 years passed. The galaxy moved on without humanity. At first, there had been some curiosity about the exiled species. A few scholars studied human history. A few artists created works about the strange beings who had challenged the ruling triad and lost. But interest faded quickly. Humans became a footnote, a warning story told to young species who showed too much independence. The ruling triad tightened their grip. Tribute increased. Species that had once traded with humanity were watched carefully. Those who spoke of equality or freedom found themselves facing new taxes, new restrictions, new punishments. The Brelanak were the first to suffer. They had been humanity's closest allies, a species of small, quick beings with silver fur and clever hands. The triad cut their trade routes. They raised their tribute to impossible levels. When the Brelanak could not pay, the triad took their colony worlds one by one. Within 50 years, the Brelanak were reduced to a single planet. They lived in poverty, their technology stripped away, their ships grounded. They were made an example. Other species watched and learned the lesson. Do not question, do not resist, do not remember the humans, but some remembered anyway. In hidden places, unforgotten worlds, small groups kept the memory alive. They told stories about the species that had stood before the ruling triad and refused to bow. They whispered about ideas that had almost changed everything. They wondered what had happened to the humans behind their prison of folded space. Most of them assumed the humans were dead. 200 years in isolation would destroy any species. Without trade, without resources from outside, without hope of rescue, surely humanity had collapsed into war and starvation and extinction. The containment sphere floated silently at the edge of explored space. No one went near it. There was no point. Nothing could pass through that wall of twisted reality. But strange things began to happen. The first incident was easy to ignore. A cargo ship vanished near the sphere's outer edge. The triad investigators blamed pirates. They did not investigate too carefully. Ships disappeared all the time in deep space. The second incident was harder to explain. A Morveth observation post, stationed to monitor the sphere, simply stopped transmitting. When a patrol ship arrived to check on it, the post was gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, just gone, as if it had never existed. The triad sent more patrols. They found nothing. Then the readings started. The containment sphere was designed to be stable. It drew power from external generators, massive stations that floated in a ring around the prison. The generators had been running perfectly for 200 years. Now they were shutting down. One by one, the generators went dark. But the sphere did not collapse. It remained exactly as strong as before. Something inside the sphere was powering it now. Something was using the very technology meant to imprison humanity. A young Vethkai scientist named Kethvorin was assigned to study the problem. He spent 3 years analyzing data from the sphere. He built complex models of how the containment technology worked. He ran simulations that pushed the limits of Vethkai computing power. What he found made no sense. The sphere was not just being powered from inside. It was being changed. The folded space that formed its walls was being reshaped, layer by layer, into something new. Kethvorin did not know what that something was. He only knew that it should not be possible. He wrote a report. He sent it to his superiors. He requested immediate investigation by the ruling triad. His report was classified. His research was seized. He was transferred to a distant outpost and told never to speak of his findings again. But Kethvorin was not the only one watching. Deep inside the containment sphere, humanity had been busy. The first 50 years had been the hardest. Humanity had prepared for exile, but preparation could only do so much. They had stored food and materials, but supplies ran low. They had planned for expansion, but expansion required resources they did not have. So they learned to create what they needed. The asteroid belt became humanity's new frontier. Millions of people moved off Earth and established colonies on rocks of ice and stone. They built factories that extracted metals from asteroids. They built farms that grew food in artificial light. They built cities in places where no city should exist. Mars was transformed in a single generation. The red planet turned green and blue as humanity reshaped its atmosphere and filled its valleys with water. Venus followed, then the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. By the 100th year of exile, more humans lived off Earth than on it. The solar system, that had once seemed small and limited, became a vast territory filled with life and activity. And through it all, they studied the sphere. General Chen had been right. The ruling triad had given humanity the most advanced technology in the galaxy. The containment sphere was a masterwork of spatial manipulation, a wall built from the fabric of reality itself. It was meant to be an unbreakable prison, but humans were very good at breaking things. The first breakthrough came in year 73. A team of physicists on Europa discovered how to read the energy patterns in the sphere. They could not change them yet, but they could understand them. They learned how folded space worked, how reality could be bent and shaped. The second breakthrough came in year 112. A group of engineers on Titan built a machine that could fold space on a small scale. It was unstable and dangerous, but it proved that the principle was sound. Humanity could do what the ruling triad could do. The third breakthrough came in year 156. A young woman named Concuil, great-granddaughter of the ambassador who had stood before the triad 2 centuries ago, figured out how to control the folding process precisely. She called her invention the fold drive. A ship equipped with this drive did not travel through space. It folded space around itself and arrived instantly at its destination. The containment sphere was based on the same principle. It was a wall of folded space, bending reality so that inside and outside no longer connected. But Concuil realized something the ruling triad had never considered. A wall could be walked around, but a fold could be redirected. The sphere did not trap humanity inside. It wrapped space around them like a blanket. And if you understood how the blanket was folded, you could unfold it anywhere you wanted. The sphere was not a prison. It was a door. Humanity just needed to learn how to open it. Year 200 arrived. The sphere had been changing for decades, its structure altered by the technology growing inside it. The external generators had all gone dark, their power no longer needed. The sphere sustained itself now, reshaped by human hands into something the ruling triad would not recognize. On a small station floating near the sphere's inner edge, a team of engineers made final preparations. Their ship was called the Messenger. It was small, built for speed and stealth rather than combat. Its fold drive was the most advanced piece of technology humanity had ever created. The team leader was a man named James, a descendant of one of the first families to colonize Mars. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. Systems are ready, his navigator reported. Fold calculations are complete. James looked at the sphere. From inside, it looked like a wall of shimmering light, beautiful and terrible. For 200 years, it had held humanity captive. For 200 years, the galaxy had forgotten they existed. That was about to change. Open the door, James said. The fold drive activated. Space twisted around the Messenger. The ship did not move, but reality folded, and suddenly the ship was somewhere else. It emerged in the heart of the ruling triad's most secure shipyard. Alarms screamed. Ships scrambled to intercept. A dozen weapons locked onto the tiny human vessel. But the Messenger did not fight. It simply sat there, visible to every sensor in the system. James opened a communication channel. His signal broadcast across the entire system, impossible to block or ignore. "This is the human vessel Messenger," he said. "We bring greetings from the species you exiled 100 years ago. We come in peace. We come to talk." Then, before any weapon could fire, space folded again. The Messenger vanished. It reappeared at another shipyard. Then another. Then a dozen more locations across the galaxy, each appearance lasting only seconds. Each broadcast sending the same message: humanity was back. Humanity had escaped their prison. Humanity wanted to talk. The ruling triad received the news within hours. They gathered in emergency session on Varanthos Prime, in the same chamber where they had sentenced humanity to exile. The HFY speaker's crystal body pulsed with angry red light. How is this possible? The sphere was perfect. Nothing could escape. The Morveth speaker's cold voice filled the chamber. Clearly we were wrong. The humans have developed technology we do not understand. They have turned our containment sphere into some kind of transportation system. The Sundaran speaker stood with flames blazing in its eyes. Then we destroy them. We send every fleet we have to their system. We crush them before they can spread further. And if they can fold space as easily as they demonstrated? The Morveth asked, how do we fight an enemy that can appear and disappear at will? Silence fell over the chamber. For the first time in 10,000 years, the ruling triad faced a problem they did not know how to solve. Far away, in the Sol system, Ambassador Adaoro Concuil stood on the observation deck of humanity's largest space station. She was very old now, kept alive by medical technology that would have its first human ship arrived at Galactic Prime. Without warning, it appeared in orbit one morning, a small vessel with smooth white hull and no visible weapons. The Galactic Defense Forces scrambled to respond, but their response was slow and uncertain. They had only 3 patrol ships left, old vessels held together with spare parts and hope. The ruling triad had taken everything else. The human ship did not attack. It simply waited. After an hour of tense silence, a transmission came through. The voice was calm and friendly, speaking in perfect Galactic language. This is the human vessel Compassion. We come with gifts and an offer. May we speak with your leaders? The Galactic had not heard from humanity in 100 years. Most had assumed the exiled species was long dead. To hear a human voice now, speaking their language, asking permission to land, was like hearing a ghost. Elder Mirken was the leader of what remained of the Galactic people. She was old and tired, worn down by decades of watching her species shrink and suffer. She had been a young diplomat when the humans were exiled. She remembered Ambassador Concuil, the calm woman who had stood before the ruling triad without fear. She gave permission for the ship to land. The Compassion touched down in the central square of the Galactic capital. It was a city that had once held millions. Now barely 100,000 Galactic remained, living in the shadows of empty buildings. A door opened in the side of the human ship. A woman stepped out. She was tall, with dark skin and short gray hair. She wore a simple uniform without decoration. In her hands, she carried a small container. Behind her came others, humans of different shapes and sizes, all carrying containers and cases. The woman walked forward until she stood before Elder Mirken. She bowed in the Galactic style, low and respectful. I am Captain Lisa Concuil, she said, granddaughter of the ambassador you once knew. We have come to repay a debt. Mirken stared at her. A debt? What debt? Your people were punished for supporting us. The ruling triad took your ships, your colonies, your future. Because you believed in the ideas we shared. Lisa opened the container she carried. Inside were seeds, thousands of them, glowing faintly with internal light. These are designed for your soil and climate. They will grow food enough to feed your people 10 times over. We have medicines that will cure diseases the triad let spread among you. We have technology to rebuild your ships, your factories, your cities. She set the container on the ground in front of the elder. We are not asking for payment. We are not asking for loyalty. We are giving these freely because you stood with us when standing with us cost you everything. Mirken looked at the seeds, then at the humans unloading their cargo, then at Lisa's face. For a long moment, she said nothing. Why? She finally asked. Why come back at all? You escaped. You are free. The triad will hunt you for this. Lisa smiled. Let them. We spent 100 years learning and growing. We did not do it so we could hide. We did it so we could come back and finish what we started. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. Humanity had returned, not with warships and weapons, but with food and medicine and technology. They were visiting every species that had once supported them, every world that had suffered for believing in equality, and they were giving help freely, asking nothing in return. The ruling triad tried to stop them. They sent patrol ships to intercept human vessels. But the humans folded space and vanished before any weapon could fire. They appeared somewhere else, delivered their cargo, and disappeared again. It was impossible to track them, impossible to predict where they would appear next, impossible to stop them from spreading their gifts and their ideas. Ambassador Concuil broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. Her image appeared on screens from the core worlds to the outer rim. An old woman with white hair and calm eyes. To all species of this galaxy, she said, we were exiled for teaching dangerous ideas. We have not stopped. Any species that wishes to learn, to trade, to stand as equals, we welcome you. Any species content under the Triad's rule, we will not interfere. The choice is yours. She paused, letting the words sink in. We do not seek revenge. We do not seek conquest. We seek only what we have always sought, a galaxy where all beings are equal, where no species rules another, where tribute and fear are replaced by trade and friendship. Another pause. The ruling Triad will tell you we are dangerous. They are right. Ideas are dangerous. Freedom is dangerous. Hope is dangerous. But these dangers lead to something better than the safety of chains. Her image faded. The message ended. Within weeks, the first species formally requested human protection. They were the Assyria, a race of builders and engineers who had once helped humanity construct their first interstellar ships. The Triad had punished them harshly for this crime. Now, with human ships appearing in their system, the Assyria declared independence from Triad rule. The Triad response was immediate. A fleet of 50 warships jumped to the Assyria system, weapons charged and ready to destroy any resistance. They found 12 human vessels waiting for them. The Triad commander was a Sundaran named Falketh, a warrior who had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He looked at the tiny human fleet with contempt. This is your defense. He broadcast, 12 ships against 50. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. The human response came from a man named Admiral Chen, descendant of the general who had begun humanity's transformation 2 centuries ago. We are not here to fight you, Chen said. We are here to give you a choice. Turn around and leave this system in peace, or stay and see what happens. Falketh laughed. The sound crackled across the communication channel. What happens is we destroy your pathetic fleet and burn this world to ash. You cannot stop us, perhaps, Chen said, but we can make fighting us very, very difficult. This is your last chance. Leave. Falketh gave the order to attack. The Triad fleet opened fire. Weapons that could crack planets, beams of energy that could slice through any shield, missiles that could track targets through any evasion. All of it directed at the 12 human ships. None of it hit. The human ships were not where the Triad sensors said they were. They were not where the targeting computers predicted they would be. They seemed to flicker, appearing in one place and then another, always just out of reach. Falketh ordered his fleet to close the distance. They would destroy the humans with sheer numbers, surrounding them until there was nowhere left to run. But as the Triad ships moved forward, their engines began to fail. One by one, ships lost power. Weapons went silent. Shields flickered and died. The humans were not fighting back. They were not firing a single weapon. They were simply folding space around the Triad fleet in tiny, precise ways. Engines pushed against reality that was not quite there. Weapons fired into pockets of twisted space that led nowhere. Power systems found their energy draining into folds that swallowed everything. Within an hour, the Triad fleet was helpless. 50 warships drifted in space, unable to move, unable to fight, unable to do anything except wait. Admiral Chen's voice came through every Triad communication system. You were conscripted into this fight by rulers who care nothing for you, he said. You follow orders because you have been taught that there is no other way. But there is another way. We offer you passage home. We offer your families sanctuary. We offer your species a seat at a table where all voices matter equally. He paused. Or you can wait for the ruling Triad to send another fleet to rescue you. But we both know what they do to commanders who fail. Silence stretched across the void. Then, one by one, the Triad ships began to broadcast surrender signals. Not because they were destroyed, not because they were defeated, because the humans had shown them a truth they could not ignore. The ruling Triad could be resisted. Their power was not absolute. There was another way. Falketh was the last to surrender. As his ship was towed toward the Assyria stations, he asked to speak with Admiral Chen. The human admiral appeared on his screen, calm and patient. "Why?" Falketh asked. "You could have destroyed us. Your technology is far beyond ours. Why show mercy?" Chen considered the question carefully. "Because destruction is easy. Anyone can destroy. We spent 100 years learning something harder. We learned to change things without breaking them. We learned to win without creating enemies who will hate us forever. But we are your enemies. The Triad will never stop fighting you. The Triad is not you," Chen said. "The Triad is 3 species who have grown comfortable with power, but their fleets are crewed by beings from 100 different worlds. Beings who serve because they have no choice. Beings who might choose differently if given the chance." He leaned forward. "Every being we spare is a being who might remember our mercy. Every species we help is a species that might stand with us when the time comes. We are not fighting a war. We are planting seeds, and seeds take time to grow." Falketh had no answer to this. He had been trained to fight, to conquer, to destroy. The idea of victory through kindness made no sense to him. But as he watched the humans help his crew, treating their injuries, sharing their food, asking nothing in return, he began to wonder if perhaps his training had been wrong. The ruling Triad gathered the largest fleet in galactic history. 10,000 warships assembled in the space between stars, drawn from every corner of Triad territory. HFY crystal destroyers, their hulls shimmering with stored energy. Morva thought ships, crewed by minds that could calculate 1,000 battle scenarios in a second. Sunderan fire carriers, their weapons capable of turning planets into ash. It had taken 5 years to build this armada. 5 years of stripping resources from every subject species. 5 years of forcing loyalty through fear. 5 years of watching their empire shrink as more and more worlds chose human friendship over Triad rule. Now it was time to end the human threat forever. Grand Admiral Kethrin stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion. He was Sunderan, old and scarred, the greatest military mind the Triad had ever produced. He had conquered entire sectors. He had crushed rebellions that threatened the very foundations of Triad power. He was afraid. He did not show it, of course. A Sunderan never showed fear. But as he looked at the tactical displays, as he reviewed the intelligence reports, as he considered everything they knew about human capabilities, he felt something cold settle in his chest. The humans had never lost a battle, not one. They had faced a dozen Triad fleets and turned them all away without firing a single weapon. Their technology was incomprehensible, their tactics impossible to predict. And now Kethrin was supposed to defeat them with brute force. "The fleet is ready," his second-in-command reported. "All ships report combat status. We await your orders." Kethrin studied the display one more time. The human coalition had established a defensive line along what they called the Freedom Border. 60 systems, each with orbital stations and ground bases, each protected by human ships and technology. The Triad fleet outnumbered the human defense forces 100 to 1. It would not be enough. Kethrin knew this in his bones, but he had his orders. The ruling Triad demanded victory. They demanded the destruction of humanity and everyone who stood with them. "Signal all ships," Kethrin said. "Begin the advance." The fleet moved forward like a tide of metal and fire. 10,000 ships, each one capable of destroying cities, all directed toward a single goal. The human response was immediate. 47 ships appeared along the border. Just 47, small vessels with white hulls and no visible weapons. They spread out in a thin line across the path of the advancing fleet. Kethrin received a transmission. A human face appeared on his screen, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair. "This is Admiral Saro Concuil of the Human Coalition," she said. "We ask you to turn back. This war serves no one. It will only bring death to beings who deserve to live. The ruling Triad has ordered your destruction," Kethrin replied. "We will not turn back." Sarah nodded sadly. "Then we will do what we must. But I want you to know that every being in your fleet has a choice. Not just you, everyone. Remember that when the time comes." The transmission ended. Catherine gave the order to attack. The Triad fleet opened fire. Thousands of weapons discharged simultaneously, enough firepower to crack a moon in half. Beams of energy and waves of missiles and projectiles moving at fractions of light speed. All of it directed at those 47 tiny ships. Nothing hit. The human ships seemed to blur and flicker. They were there, and then they were not. Weapons fire passed through empty space where they had been a moment before. Missiles locked on, and then lost their targets as reality twisted around them. The humans were folding space. Every shot that came near them was redirected somewhere else. Every missile was sent spinning into the void. Every beam of energy was bent until it faded into nothing. Catherine watched his displays with growing horror. His fleet was pouring everything they had at the enemy, and none of it was working. It was like trying to hold water in your hands. Advance, he ordered. Close to point-blank range. They cannot dodge forever. The fleet surged forward. Engines roared as ships pushed to maximum speed. The distance between the two forces shrank rapidly. And then the human ships did something new. They spread out, each one taking position near a different section of the Triad fleet. Then they began to fold space in ways Catherine had never seen before. His tactical officer screamed a warning. "Admiral, our engines are losing power." Catherine looked at his displays. All across the fleet, ships were slowing down. Not because they wanted to, because the space around them was changing. The humans were creating pockets of twisted reality. Ships that entered these pockets found that their engines pushed against nothing. Their weapons fired into nowhere. Their shields protected them from attacks that never came from the directions they expected. It was chaos. Triad ships collided with each other as their navigation systems gave them false readings. Weapons hit friendly targets as targeting computers lost all accuracy. Communication systems filled with static as signals bounced through folded space. Within hours, the largest fleet in galactic history was paralyzed. 10,000 ships drifted helplessly, unable to fight, unable to move, unable to do anything except wait. Admiral Concuil's transmission came through every communication system in the fleet. Her voice was calm and sad. "We have disabled your fleet without destroying a single ship. Your crews are alive. Your vessels are intact. This is not because we cannot destroy you. It is because we choose not to." She paused. "Every being in this fleet was conscripted by rulers who see you as tools. You were sent here to die for the privilege of 3 ancient species. But you do not have to die. You do not have to fight for masters who care nothing for you." Another pause. "We offer you a choice. We will tow your ships to safe ports. We will feed and heal your crews. We will send you home to your families if that is what you want. Or if you wish, we will welcome you as allies in building something new. Your rulers will tell you this is a trick. They will tell you that we will enslave you or destroy you. But look at your situation. We could have killed you all. Instead, we are offering you kindness. Ask yourself which sounds more like the galaxy you want to live in." Silence followed. Then, slowly, ships began to broadcast surrender signals. It started with the smaller species, beings who had been forced into Triad service against their will. Their ships powered down their weapons and opened channels to the human vessels nearby. Then the Morveth ships began to surrender. The ancient beings of thought had calculated the odds. They knew that continuing to fight was pointless. Better to accept human mercy than to die for nothing. Even some Sundaran ships lowered their shields. Not many at first, but enough. Warriors who had spent their lives following orders began to question whether those orders were worth dying for. Catherine watched his fleet dissolve, not through destruction, but through choice. The humans had given his soldiers a better option, and they were taking it. His second-in-command approached, face pale with shock. "Admiral, what do we do?" Catherine was silent for a long moment. He thought about his orders, about his duty, about everything he had believed in his long career. Then he thought about his family, his children and grandchildren, living on a Sundaran colony world far from here. What kind of galaxy would they grow up in? "Open a channel to the human admiral," he said quietly. Sarah Concuil's face appeared on his screen. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired and sad. "Admiral Catherine," she said, "I hope we would not have to fight you. You have not fought us," Catherine replied. "You have shown us something we did not know how to see. I have commanded fleets for 100 years. I have won battles that seemed impossible, but I have never seen anyone win a war by choosing not to kill. He took a deep breath. I surrender my fleet. All ships under my command will stand down. My only request is that you treat my crews with the same kindness you have promised. Sarah nodded. They will be treated as guests, not prisoners. And you, Admiral? What will you choose? Catherine looked around his bridge. His officers watched him with mixed expressions. Fear, confusion, and something else. Something that might have been hope. I am old, he said. I have spent my life serving masters who used me as a weapon. Perhaps it is time to learn a different way. He met Sarah's eyes through the screen. If you will have me, I would like to see this galaxy you are building. Sarah smiled. It was a warm smile, without mockery or triumph. You are welcome, Admiral. We have much to teach each other. The news of the fleet's defeat reached the ruling triad within days, on Varanthos Prime. The three ancient speakers gathered in their chamber, but there were no representatives from other species now. No audience, no ceremony, just three beings facing the end of everything they had built. The HFY speaker's crystal body flickered with dim, uncertain light. We have lost our greatest fleet, defeated without a single human casualty. How do we fight an enemy we cannot touch? The Morveth speaker floated in silence for a long moment. We cannot, it finally said. The humans have developed technology far beyond our understanding. They can fold space as easily as we fold cloth. Against such power, conventional warfare is meaningless. The Sundaran speaker's flames burned low, barely more than embers. Then we build new weapons. We find new allies. We fight on. Fight with what? The HFY asked. Half our subject species have already joined the human coalition. The other half are waiting to see who wins before choosing sides. We have no resources, no loyal soldiers, nothing left to fight with. The chamber fell silent. For 10th Peace Conference took place on Varanthos Prime, in the same chamber where humanity had been exiled 100 years before. The chamber looked different now. The floating platforms that had once held 300 species arranged in rings of power were gone. In their place stood a single round table, large enough to seat representatives from every species in the galaxy. No position was higher than another. No seat was more important. It had taken human engineers 3 months to rebuild the chamber. They had worked alongside HFY architects and Morveth designers, species that had once ruled the galaxy, learning to cooperate as equals. The ruling triad came to the table last. They moved slowly, their ancient bodies showing signs of age that no one had seen before. The HFY speaker's crystal form was dim and cloudy. The Morveth speaker floated lower than usual, its metal shell scratched and dented. The Sundaran speaker's flames barely flickered. They took their seats at the table. Just 3 seats among hundreds, no different from any others. Admiral Sarah Concuil sat across from them. She was older now, her hair completely white, her face lined with years of difficult decisions. But her eyes were still sharp, still full of the quiet determination that had guided humanity through to centuries of exile and 10 years of impossible war. Thank you for coming, she said. We have much to discuss. The HFY speaker was the first to respond. Its voice was softer than it had been, less certain. We have agreed to your terms. We will disband our combined military forces. We will end the tribute system. We will release all species from their obligations to us. It paused. But we wish to understand something first. Ask, Sarah said. Why? The word hung in the air. You could have destroyed us. After what we did to your species, you would have been justified. Instead, you offer us a seat at your table, a voice in your new order. Why? Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. Because that was never the point. She said, we were not fighting to defeat you. We were fighting to change the galaxy, to prove that there is a better way than rule by force. She leaned forward. If we had destroyed you, we would have become what you were. We would have ruled through fear, just as you did. Species would have obeyed us because they were afraid of what we might do, not because they believed in what we represented. But you had the power, the Sundaran speaker said. Its flames flickered with confusion. Power is meant to be used, to dominate, to control. Power is a tool, Sarah replied. It can be used to build or to destroy. We chose to build. And now we offer you the same choice. The negotiations lasted for months. Every detail had to be worked out. How would trade flow between species that had never dealt with each other as equals? How would disputes be settled without a ruling authority? How would the technology humanity had developed be shared fairly? It was slow, frustrating work. Species that had been enemies for centuries had to learn to talk to each other. Traditions that had stood for millennia had to be examined and often discarded. Old wounds had to be addressed. Old grievances heard and acknowledged. But slowly, piece by piece, a new order began to take shape. The Galactic Assembly was established, a body where every species had a single vote. No matter how old, how large, how powerful, each species was equal in the Assembly's eyes. Decisions were made by discussion and consensus, not by force. Humanity took no special position. They voted like everyone else. They traded like everyone else. They sat in the same seats and spoke with the same voice as species that had once been their subjects or their masters. Some people questioned this. Why should humanity give up the power they had earned? Why share technology that could have made them rulers of everything? Sarah Concuil addressed these questions at the Assembly's first full session. "We spent 100 years in exile," she said. "We had time to think about what we wanted the galaxy to be. We could have used that time to plan revenge. Instead, we planned for this day, for a galaxy where our great-grandchildren would grow up as equals among equals, not as rulers standing alone." She looked around the chamber at the representatives of 300 species. Power is easy to gain and hard to give up, but true strength is not measured by what you can take. It is measured by what you choose to share. The ruling triad struggled with their new position. The HFY adapted most easily. They were ancient beings, patient and philosophical. They had ruled for so long that they had forgotten why they started. Now, freed from the burden of power, some of them began to explore other paths. They became teachers, sharing the wisdom of their long existence with younger species. The Morveth had the hardest time. Their entire culture was built around calculation and control. Without an empire to manage, many of them felt lost and purposeless. Some withdrew to their home worlds, unable to accept a galaxy they could not dominate. Others, slowly, began to find new ways to use their vast intelligence, solving problems instead of creating them. The Sunderen remained bitter. They were warriors who had lost a war. Many refused to accept the new order. They retreated to their ancestral systems and closed their borders, nursing their wounded pride in isolation. But not all of them. Admiral Kethrin became an ambassador for the Assembly. He traveled to Sunderen colonies, speaking to warriors and leaders, showing them by example that there was honor in building peace. "I spent my life as a weapon," he told them. "I destroyed what others had created. But destruction is easy. Any fool can break things. It takes true strength to make something that lasts." Some listened. Some did not. But slowly, generation by generation, even the Sunderen began to change. 20 years after the peace conference, the containment sphere was transformed. It no longer served as a prison. Human engineers had reshaped it into something new, a monument and a school. Species came from across the galaxy to study there, to learn the technology that humanity had developed during their exile. The sphere taught them to fold space, to bend reality without breaking it. But more than that, it taught them how humanity had learned these things, how they had taken their prison and turned it into their greatest teacher, how they had faced darkness and chosen to grow instead of despair. At the center of the sphere floated a new station. It was made of crystal and metal and living wood, materials from a dozen different species all woven together. Inside, thousands of beings lived and worked and learned side by side. And at the heart of the station, in a garden filled with plants from 100 worlds, stood a memorial dot. It was a simple pillar of white stone. On it were carved the words that Ambassador Adara Okonkwo had spoken 100 years before. "When the Triad sentenced humanity to exile, we understand. We will remember this kindness." Beneath those words, carved after her death 10 years ago, were the words that explained what humanity had truly meant. They tried to bury us. They did not know we were seeds. Visitors came from across the galaxy to see the memorial. They stood in the garden and read the words and tried to understand the species that had turned punishment into promise. A young alien diplomat named Verithan visited the memorial 50 years after the peace. She was Brelanak, her silver fur touched with gray, a granddaughter of the generation that had nearly been destroyed. She stood before the pillar and read the words. Beside her stood an old human woman, a guide who helped visitors understand what they were seeing. They had every reason to hate us, Verithan said, every reason to want revenge. But instead they came back with food and medicine and friendship. Why? The guide smiled. She was very old, her hair white and thin, her movements slow. But her eyes were bright with memory. My great-grandmother asked the same question, she said. She was there when the humans first returned to Brelanak Prime. She asked Captain Concuil why humanity chose kindness instead of revenge. What did she say? She said that revenge is a circle. It goes around and around, each hurt creating new hurt, until everyone is trapped in pain. But kindness is a line. It moves forward. It creates new possibilities. The guide looked up at the memorial. The humans wanted to break the circle. They wanted to start something new. Verithan considered this. And it worked. The galaxy is different now, better, not perfect, the guide said. Never perfect. There are still conflicts, still disagreements, still species that prefer the old ways. But yes, better. And still getting better, one choice at a time, in the assembly chamber on Varanthos Prime. The daily business of galactic civilization continued. Representatives argued about trade agreements and environmental protections and cultural exchanges. They debated policies and proposed programs and sometimes raised their voices in frustration. But they did not threaten. They did not conquer. They did not demand tribute or punish disobedience. They talked. They negotiated. They compromised. It was messy and slow and often frustrating. But it was also something that had never existed before in this galaxy's long history. A civilization of equals, building a future together. Sero Concuil had died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 112. Her final words had been recorded and shared across the galaxy. We proved something.